from the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
This is the CFL This Week here on the Ticats Audio Network. Of course, as always, every week, every Monday, we go deep with the most sometimes controversial and topical topics that there is to beat up on. And this week, of course, we bring in our great co-hosts, 3 of them this week, 2 of them good friends of the show. And yes, rookie alert. Let's start with the rookie. He does write for Canadian Football Perspective. And of course, as you see, the double blue, of course, we are the Ticats Audio Network. It has to be recognized. He is an accredited writer for the Toronto Argonauts, and he hosts the X's and Argos podcast. Ben, great to have you.
I'm really happy to be here, and I'm sorry about bringing all the double blue along with me. Well, maybe I'm not.
Wow. Hey, I know it's good to see a proud Argonauts fan. I'll go that deep and say that much. He writes for the Winnipeg Free Press, writing about the Jets and what's gone wrong there and what may happen this year. But of course, he's all smiles with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Jeff Hamilton, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my man, good to be here. You know what I was going to say? As much as it's the Ticats Audio, you don't have a single recognition of Hamilton in the background there, and we appreciate it over here in Winnipeg. Oh, there it is. No, don't let them fool you. Good to be here.
I'm trying to be unbiased always. And he does the best job of being unbiased all the time on TSN. No doubt, Glenn Suter bringing it every single week with his analyst and analysis of the game and experience. And always great to have you on the show there, Glenn.
Well, if you take a look at my Twitter account, you'd say I'm not unbiased. That it's quite amazing after a game, especially with Saskatchewan in it, when I have Saskatchewan fans saying, well, he's overcompensating because he used to play. By the way, that was like 40 years ago or something. And then there's the very next tweet is, oh, my goodness, he cheers for Saskatchewan. So my Twitter account would suggest that I'm not unbiased, but I try to be.
Well, in terms of social media, I don't know where to take this. And that'll be something we'll talk about in this week's show. Guys, let's start right off the top because they are on top. Blue Bombers 9-0. They've yet to have a bye week. Glenn, I think it was you that brought that up, and I didn't even know that. I was like, what? This team have yet to have a bye week? Is it premature? We'll start with you, Glenn. Is it premature to start discussing the CFL's first 18-0 season?
I still think it's early. There's a lot of football to be played, but I love it. Let's do it because it'll get a whole bunch of people talking. It's another way to promote sort of the big bad Bombers in the world of Canadian football. Sometimes it's good to have your sort of New York Yankees type of team that everybody is always gunning for, and when you're on the top, that's what you are. So, I think it's great to go in and say, can this team pull it off this week? And we're going to do that until they finally drop one. And I don't, so I'm sort of standing on the fence with it because it is early, but let's keep doing it.
Ben, they look incredible. Whether they play incredible or not is another thing, but they're 9-0.
I think it's just too tough. It's too tough for them. And it's not like they've been blowing everybody out. The funny thing is, other than BC, which, this is the last thing you would expect anyone would really take the hammer to, but they haven't really lit it up on anybody. One of the problems with Winnipeg is that they seem to sort of match whoever they're playing. Remember, they should probably have lost to the Red Blacks in week 1. Toronto was a missed extra point away from that game going into overtime. So I think there's only so many of those that you can go through without just the football gods having something go wrong. So I think 18-0 is a stretch. And that said, just for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, I hope they lose soon, because I can tell you they don't want this hanging over them. That's the last thing the coaching staff wants heading down the last few weeks of the season. People talking about an undefeated season, they do not want that, because it takes the focus away. It then puts pressure on you to not rest guys maybe in the last few weeks. So I hope for their sakes they lose soon.
Jeff, I can't think of a better head coach to deal with a situation like this than Mike O'Shea. 18-0, are you smelling it?
Well, you know what? Is it premature to talk about it? Absolutely not. Is it premature to demand it or suggest it? For sure. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to win week in and week out. As for talking about it, I think it's fair in the sense that if you look at the CFL season, like 18 holes, the Bombers have finished the front nine perfect. So now we have a sample size. I mean, when it was 4-0, 5-0, we didn't have a sample size that you could look at and go, okay, can they replicate that? Well, as you kind of mentioned off the top, this team hasn't had a bye week. Now they have competition in this back nine here. They play BC twice. They play Saskatchewan twice. They play Calgary once more. So it's not as if they're going through the lowly East, but they're doing so under much different circumstances than the front nine. They have 3 byes over here. And as far as, as you mentioned, that is the difference as head coach Mike O'Shea. Look, I cover this team day in and day out. It's exhausting in hearing the same thing, but it's been like that, not through the first 9 weeks. It's been like that through the first 2 years and then 9 weeks of the last 3 seasons. So, is it premature to suggest they can do it? Absolutely. I don't think they will. There's a reason why there's no perfect team in the CFL. Since the Canadian Football League. I think it was 1930 something or whatever that there was the perfect season, including a Grey Cup win. But certainly too premature to talk about that. I think the Bombers' biggest issue of going 18-0 is going 15-0 or 14-0, locking up first in the West, and then not having or not having their starters playing the last 3-4 months like we saw in 2021. So I think it's going to be very challenging. It's going to be a mark that the Bombers are going to have no interest in hitting. So if they do get to 16-0, they're not going to play their best guys the last 2 games to get that perfect mark. It's all about the Grey Cup. So as fun as it is to talk about it, I'm with the panel in the sense that it might be premature to suggest it's happening, but it sure is fun to talk about week in and week out as they continue to get wins every week.
Guys, 2 things there from Jeff that really blow me away is that if this team does get into a position of being 16-0, right? I mean, we're talking incredible history. To go 18-0 in a football season is incredible. I mean, am I being foolish here? Sitting starters when you're on the verge of the ultimate history for a regular season suits? Like, would you actually even think about doing that?
Oh, yeah. And Michael O'Shea will do it because it is about the championships. That's the legacy you want to leave, that you are a champion, the best in the league. And to do it and to three-peat, which will be on the line at that point. I think you guys make a great point with regards to those final 2 seasons and wondering if they can get to 18-0. Those final, or not seasons, but games, those final 2 games of the year, very likely that they don't play their starters and Zach doesn't play and all of that. So, they drop one of those and the perfect record is gone. But again, I don't think for a second Michael O'Shea will hesitate to rest his starters, make sure he's ready for a playoff run in another championship.
And it's funny that Glenn kind of said something that really rocked my socks there is he kind of said that the big bad Bombers, like we were talking about, in terms of the franchises, the big bad Argos, because they had all the money, and the Edmonton. I mean, I'll go back a little further to the Eskimos when, their years of championships and the dynasties coming from those teams, even Montreal there in the 90s with the Calvillo years. And we're talking about, again, the Tiger Cats here haven't won since 1999. The Bombers had an incredible streak of not winning a Grey Cup. And now here we are talking about them being the dominant force of the Canadian Football League. It's a surprise to me here.
But it's great in that there are such entertaining games. Like almost every Blue Bombers game this season has been wonderful. And I want to take issue a little bit with some of the narrative of the East being terrible and the West being great, because you look at some of those Bombers games against the East teams, which one of those games wasn't an entertaining game? They've played Ottawa a couple of times, they played Toronto. It's those teams that have actually challenged them a little bit. So I think there's way more parity in this league, and even then the records would show, because you look at the records and yes, the East looks pathetic and the West looks great, but the games between East and West, for the most part, have been really close. And what I love about the Bombers is having a sort of dynasty team like this is good for sports. It is good for the league, but especially when they're competitive games. If they were walking out every week, blowing teams out 60-0, that's not good for the league. But having this sort of dynasty team that is in games, that has to come from behind to beat the Red Blacks, that's a great story, and that's worth following. There's nobody missing a Blue Bombers game any week because they're like, oh, it's, they're going to crush this team. That doesn't really happen. So I think it's fantastic.
Jeff, and you bring up a great point about being in the locker room and in the media room and having to hear the coach rhetoric, which we hear all the time. That's all the coaches saying kind of the same thing. What are the fans saying?
Oh, the fans, I mean, it's never been a greater time to be a fan of the blue and gold. I mean, this is their time. I mean, you mentioned that drought. It was 28 years. So it wasn't, it was quite some time. It was an entire generation of fans that missed out on a championship. So everyone's riding high. And, it's funny, right? But the big bad Bombers tag is funny to me in the sense that they're the big bad team because they're the big bad winners, but they're actually probably one of the most likable teams in the Canadian Football League, and they've done it in a way that every other organization is trying to replicate. If you look at some teams in the past, and I'm not going to necessarily point out specific teams out there, but I mean, you look at even the Toronto Argonauts in 2017. I mean, they kind of bought a team. It was fine talent, and it all came together. This is what you need in the Canadian Football League. You need continuity. You need continuity in your executive. You need continuity in your coaching staff. You need continuity in your roster, and everyone's chasing that. And it's just become, it's taken time. It hasn't been an over the night situation. Like if you'll recall, I mean, people wanted Mike O'Shea the hell out of town. He was 12-24 through 2 seasons. All the columnists were writing that he was a waste of time. They were focusing on his shorts and not his strategy. And ultimately, he turned things around. And just to kind of bring it all around to the question. I mean, they will be aiming for a third straight championship. This is dynasty territory. That is the priority here. If they can lock things up early, they'll want to do that. And they're one home win away from punching their ticket to a history. I mean, even if you want to look at last season, the defense was running at a historic level. There was no interest, not just from the players, but particularly from the coaching staff, to have that record intact, to have those such few points in the fourth quarter. Nobody cared about that. Everyone cared about the playoffs and getting to the Grey Cup, and it's just rinse and repeat this season.
Last one to you on this, Glenn. Is there something to be said? And I ask you because you played the game, you've seen the longest stretch of Canadian Football League season. So I feel it's important to ask you this question. What is there something to be said about being able to blow out an opponent, but yet find these ways of winning games and continue this streak?
Yeah, when I hear people say, well, they didn't win by enough, so they're not a dominant team, or they're not blowing out teams, so they're not that great of a team, that it's bordering on disrespect, because to win at the highest levels is so difficult. I mean, think about it, guys. To win at your beer league hockey team is with 8 teams in your division is really, really hard. You have to be consistent. You have to be disciplined. You have to be doing it for the right reasons. The guy beside you, not for your own personal agenda and goals and and awards and things like that. So it is so difficult. And to get to 9-0 is remarkable. And to think that, well, it's not by enough. Silly. These are pros fighting for food on the table, and as mentioned earlier, the East is not bad because of their records, because the games have all been close. So all 75% of them have been close. And yeah, I know. I think if you're winning, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 100.
I go to my notes here. 34 of 37, 477 yards passing, 5 touchdowns through the air, 1 touchdown run. Guys, we went to bed with this one like last week on this very podcast. Dan Ralph, I'll give him credit. The only one that said Nathan Rourke is the MVP. The rest of us were all over Zach Collaros. Nathan Rourke, those are incredible numbers. I don't care who you're playing. Now, if Zach Collaros was your pick for MOP last week, like myself, I have now jumped to the other side. Jeff, who is your MVP?
See, this is talk about premature. Like it was Nathan Rourke after week 2 or week 1 or whatever. Then it was, because Zach Collaros came out of the gate slow. Like, he wasn't, I was, writing all those gamers, and it was defense, picks up the slack, and the defense that no one thought could be replicated from 2021 is back. That was the narrative through the first 3 games. And then Zach Collaros started to arrive. He started to do what we saw from him late in 2019. He started to extend plays. He started to take games into his own hands. So I'm not surprised while Nathan Rourke couldn't live up to his high expectations off the bat. I think he dipped for like a week or 2. That just changed the narrative to Zach Collaros being MOP. And I'll be frank, I didn't have Zach Collaros as my MOP last week. I didn't have Nathan Rourke as my MOP in week 2. I think it's a ridiculous thing to proclaim. I understand the idea at this stage to do your half season awards and who's the leading candidate. And if I did have Zach Collaros, which I didn't, I sure as hell have Nathan Rourke now. I mean, he hasn't played 9 games yet. He's the most dynamic player. He's proven to, if you go look and check the receipts, I think I had BC at like 8th or 9th in my rankings because I wasn't buying into, Nathan Rourke being this as big of a stud as he is. I figured, as is often the case, once you get more film on a quarterback, he becomes easier to game plan against. And while Nathan Rourke had some success last season, I don't think anybody would have predicted, maybe anyone outside of the BC Lions organization, that this guy was going to be the juggernaut that he's become. But he has weapons around him. It's shown proof that if you can take an easier salary, a lesser salary, as is the case with Nathan Rourke, you can bring in weapons around him. Not just his receivers, who are amongst the best in the league, but an O-line that's massively improved from last season. So absolutely. I mean, if you had to appoint the MOP today, I don't know how you could not look at Nathan Rourke, given what he's been able to do, the yards that he's thrown, the ability of, he is, it's hard to look at it. We're having this conversation as my last point with a couple of friends over the last couple of days, and it's hard to believe Caleb Evans and Nathan Rourke are in the same league. I just, to me, it's just, this guy is, head and shoulders above, and we'll see what the last 9 games has to show. But I do think it's a bit of a 2-horse race. And so long as Zach Collaros can continue to play as effectively as he is and rack up the wins, I don't see why he won't be in the race. But Nathan Rourke has become, almost in a bit of a class of his own, just pure, individual skill set.
And that's it, Ben. I mean, like, he's good. Like, I mean, I think we all thought, again, right out of the gate. And of course, people were talking NFL the first couple of weeks, and I'd say, whoa. But other than the bit of a slapping that he took from the Bombers, and I thought that game he played okay. I think the Bombers played so well early in that contest against BC that they kind of fell behind. I believe, Jeff, 21-0 in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it was the same thing that that the Alouettes did to the Riders.
Right.
When they were coming, but it was opposite. It was opposites. It was the Riders were coming off a short week and got pummeled. The Bombers were coming off a short week heading into BC, and they were the ones that laid the pummeling. But it was 21, I think, early, but it was a kickoff touchdown, 7-0 within seconds of the game.
Right. Ben, have you seen anything like this kid?
Not in my memory. It's really impressive. What I love about him is, well, first of all, we talked about the weapons he's got around him, and all that stuff's great. But just look at his individual play. He's doing things that you see veterans do, not just in terms of his reads. Like, he hasn't just been given what you see so many young quarterbacks given, where you've got one read here. You're watching the corner sinks, you go here, the corner sits, you go here. He's looking across the whole field, and it's a good thing. He's got so many amazing targets. But he also has learned to protect himself. That's something that's changed in the last few weeks. You watch him this week, there were a couple instances where he should have taken big hits. And most young quarterbacks who are going to hang in there would take big hits. But you see him do what the vets do, what guys like Collaros have learned to do, where as they're throwing, they then sort of fade away, fall backwards, don't take that big shot. He's learned to preserve himself. He's learned to run more tactically. And that's gonna bode well for BC long term, but for himself long term as well, staying healthy. But yeah, he does not look at all in any way like a young player, and he's so young. So that's the most impressive thing to me.
You know, Suits, the thing that kills me about this, and I know the game has changed compared to, when you played, where maybe the quarterback took more downfield shots. So your completion percentage was probably lower. You're probably really happy if you had a 60% completion rate in a game and even in a season. I think of a guy like, I'll switch leagues. Joe Namath is in the Hall of Fame, and he's a below 50% passer. This kid, this game was 93%, and he's now into the eight. He's been hanging around the 80s all season long. I can't, and again, I know the game has changed. It's more check down stuff, but that is still incredible to be completing that amount of passes in a single game.
Yeah, they used to say that it's hard to complete 80% of your passes in practice against air, because guys are going to drop one here or there. But there's two phenomenal stories going on right now in the league. One we touched on off the top, which is the Bombers 9-0, but the other is Nathan Rourke. I've never seen it, and I've watched both leagues for a long time. For a 24-year-old to be this accurate, this quick to release the football and process what he's seeing defensively, to be able to, there's three things. Kent Austin used to say there are three things that you have to check when looking at a new young quarterback. One is his accuracy. Obviously, that's sort of the execution end of it. Two is his decision-making process. Is he throwing it to the right guy? Is he making the right reads? And three is his mental and physical toughness. And we have seen, and that just doesn't mean playing through injuries and things. To knock on wood, he hasn't been hurt, and he's going to have to at some point play through a sore knee or a sore back or whatever it may be. This is part of the game. But I have never seen a 24-year-old play with that level of execution, that level of poise and understanding defenses like he does. His off-field study habits are through the roof. Unique, I think. I mentioned on the air in the last telecast that I know other quarterbacks in the league are saying, wait a minute, I'm the first guy in too, and the last guy to leave, and studying a ton. This guy's taking it to a new level in a lot of ways, including not being on social media for the last 5 years at all. Like he doesn't have an account in Facebook or anything, because he doesn't want to waste his time. He'd rather be watching game film. So I've never seen it, guys. I think it's a great story. And also, by the way, he's Canadian. And I hope we don't as a country just start that narrative that, well, this probably means he's going to the NFL. If he does that, he'll be a great ambassador for our league, and I wish him the best, because he'll make lots of money doing the exact same thing he's doing here. But I hope we don't start to tag that with everything we say about Nathan Rourke, because maybe he does the Warren Moon method to get there, which is win a few championships, be the MOP a couple times, and then go and make a ton of money down there. I hope that's the way it goes, because as you guys know, in hockey, we don't hear, sooner or later, Connor McDavid is going to go to an American team. Like sooner or later, he's going to do that because there's more money down there. He's going to do that. We don't say that every single day. We talk about Connor McDavid. I hope we don't do that with Nathan Rourke.
Jeff, and that's a great point about the NFL. He had a tryout with the Giants. These are supposedly the best guys at picking apart a guy's game, his study habits, his drop, his throwing motion. What did the Giants not see that, that obviously the Lions did?
I'd love to peek in their scouting books and give you an exact answer. Unfortunately, don't have access to that. However, I would say it's, if you talk to a lot of people, anyone who gets a chance to play in the NFL, there's a lot of politics that you need to get past. It's a wake-up call for a lot of guys who show up there, and they, their experiences, and it's not sour grapes. They literally did not have a single chance of making the team. That becomes very apparent when you get there. And whether it was, not enough to see, whether it was, not enough, as great as he was in school, if it wasn't, wasn't as good a school as players they want, it's a tough, not to mention it's tough to be to get a job that is so few, and so it's not a surprise whatsoever. I think a lot of the buzz here with Nathan Rourke in the NFL is because he's doing something extremely special, as Glenn has suggested over his time, has never seen something like it before, and he's doing it at an age where it demands an opportunity to go to a higher level. And so, you look at a lot of players around the league, you look at guys like Willie Jefferson, guys that stand out, and you look, they get their chances, but they've often, Willie, I guess, had early in his career, but he's too old. He's too old to come up and play in that league now. And so Nathan Rourke falls right into that sweet spot of age and execution. And let's face it, if Chris Streveler can get a shot in the NFL,
exactly,
Nathan Rourke can get a shot in the NFL. So I think that's where we land. I will make one last comment about Nathan's pursuit of MOP, which, again, I think he's at the leaderboard. I personally, and this isn't a slight against him, would like to see what his second half looks like. He's put up a lot of yards and scored a lot of touchdowns against the Edmonton Elks. They're a tire fire. They've been a tire fire all season long. They're trying to find continuity. That last game, I mean, if you look at some of the plays that Davis Sanchez broke down and others on the panel, there were some pretty big breakdowns on what the hell Edmonton was doing on defense. And again, not a slight against Nathan Rourke. He took advantage of that, and he needs to be able to hang in the pocket on some of those plays. But this last half season for him, he's got starting next week, he's got Calgary 3 times. He's got the Bombers twice. He's got Sass twice. So it's going to be a tough, back nine, if you will, for him. And if he can continue to even play close to what he's playing, he's an absolute shoo-in at the end of the year awards, in my opinion.
Stay tuned, folks. All right.
This is my favorite topic coming up. This is my favorite topic.
Well, I mean, and I only bring this up. I wasn't going to touch this, but I actually had a little back and forth with Gary Stern that I didn't really expect. I mean, I threw out a comment and he answered me, and which one excited me. It fired me up. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. And then it seemed like there was a whole lot of conversations on social media with Alouettes owner Gary Stern. He's guaranteeing a victory against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who are 8-0, and they are in his building. It seemed incredibly crazy to me. And then a little later in the week, Elks owner Victor Cui is predicting that his team is ready to win 4 straight games. I mean, this is kind of very Jerry Jones-like. I mean, so I asked the question, I'll start with you, Ben, like, should owners just kind of write the check, sign the check, stay out of the media spotlight, or are we enjoying this?
I love when owners are visible. I actually really like that part of it. Now, this is from a fan and a media perspective. I think it's fantastic. I think it's good for the league. I think it creates conversations and debates like this one that we're having now. And that is all good stuff. Now, from a coaching perspective, I think that's got to be the worst thing ever. So that's the last thing you want as a head coach, having your owner go and predict victories, because it's not the same as you and I predicting a victory for whichever club. This is the owner. They're tied in. It's someone within the organization, and that carries a different weight with it. So yeah, I love it. I think we all probably here, I think, enjoy the conversation that it brings. But yeah, I feel bad for those head coaches, because it's not a position that you want to say in. But on the other hand, what's he supposed to say? Like, no, we're not going to win? Or it depends how the question's asked. It's just most owners, I think, will find a way around that and say, I have every confidence in the team. We're going to go out there and put on a good game. You don't usually say, yeah, we are going to beat the undefeated Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I guarantee it.
Glenn, if I'm Willie Jefferson, I'm going to drop your quarterback, and then I'm going to say, hey, leave that message for your owner.
Yeah, they're not even waiting for the questions anymore.
That's what I was going to say. There's not even a question. There's no question there. No one is asking them.
Yeah, but it's funny because I have no problem with it. Here's why. First of all, it has nothing to do with winning and losing. So the players are going to prepare the same. The coaches are going to prepare the same. It has really nothing to do with it. But if it engages one fan, then great, it's worth it. If it engages a handful of people to say, you know what, the owner is talking trash, I'm going to watch to see if his team can pull it out and, do it for him and back up his words. As long as we're engaging fans and finding new ways to do that, that's great. I think overall, just as a general observation from the outside looking in, our ownership group right now and presidents is excellent. I mean, Victor Cui is fantastic in Edmonton. I think he's taking a different approach. I am nothing but impressed with Amar Doman in Vancouver. Had a chance to talk to him a couple of times. He just did an interview on Sekeres and Price here in the Lower Mainland and talked about the Toronto situation and some of their things that they have said publicly, and just, basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, but that it wasn't helpful and that they should take responsibility for building their fan base. And I just am super impressed and feel like finally there's an ally when it comes to selling Canadian football to Canadians.
Yeah, I was going to pick up exactly what Suits was saying, and a number of those things, whether it's just the improved or ownership throughout the league. I think we're at a point now where we're healthiest as ever. There's obvious efforts made by the Victor Cuis, by Elmer Doman, by Gary Stern to be active. I mean, the social media stuff, I think it's hilarious. I think it's you look at Gary Stern, and I mean, he seems like a ticking time bomb. I don't know what's going to happen. So far, he hasn't gotten in trouble, but in an age of social media and all these things, I mean, he knows how to ride that line, if you will. And there's there's some parody accounts about him already where it's like they tweet like him. So he's got an established style of tweeting. I'm all for it. I think I do agree with with Ben in the sense that it certainly is. I think it's tough on the coaching staff. I don't think they necessarily lose sleep over. If you look at the coaches that are involved in that, I think they would probably roll their eyes before anything. But at the same time, I thought, at least Gary Stern's thing was a shtick, right? I mean, it was every week, and it will be every week. He's trying to create buzz on Twitter with his fan base. He's trying to put excitement in there, and when he loses, he doesn't hide. He's there saying, tough night and great effort by the other team and blah, blah. We'll be back next week. And sure enough, 3 days later, he's guaranteeing the next win for his team because he believes in his franchise. I love it. I don't know where Victor Cui was coming from when he decided to say that the Edmonton Elks were going to win 4 straight games. It was just, and then, promptly go out and get their asses handed to them in game 1. And so that, to me, it was just, for a guy who's seemingly done everything right this season, for him to have, and we did get an answer to it. He did come out and say why. He had a conversation with Chris Jones and the staff, and he felt good. He felt great, if you will, coming off the bye, and that they were going to be doing some damage while 12 new players, in the roster, in the lineup from the week before, did not translate to success. So he just looks like a guy who is just, a bit of a moron, So, but, and I mean that in the most respectful terms as possible. It's just when you come out there and say, the Edmonton Elks are going to win the next 4 games and then put the teams in brackets of who they are, it is fodder, and it really looks bad if you can't even get through the first door without falling through.
But Ben, I mean, this all started with Gary Stern talking about, I guess, playing the Argonauts and guaranteeing victory there. And I mean, shouldn't you learn your lesson? I mean, his team missed an extra point to put a game into overtime. And they did. He went dark for a little bit. And I think he actually, God bless his soul, I think he had COVID and he had to shut it down for a little bit. And then but now he's all fired up again. And I mean, I think you said it, Jeff, is that the coaching staff, I mean, does it not put a little extra pressure on you? I mean, and man, I'm presuming as a coach and a head coach and a positional coach, you got enough pressure on you other than when your owner's shooting the mouth off.
I think
look at the 2 guys though. Chris Jones, who's probably just wants to take not I'm gonna say take him in a back room and shake him, but just be like, okay, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter what our owner says; it's completely separated. And then you look at Gary Stern, and Kari Jones already had enough pressure on his plate. He didn't matter if there were guaranteed wins. Anyway, sorry, Ben.
No, just like what you're saying, there's enough pressure on all these coaches. Every single coach, every single week is feeling pressure. Even Coach O'Shea feels pressure for a different reason, mind you. It's not like a couple of bad games are going to end his career. It's just that this is such a competitive league, like we've addressed before. Every coach feels pressure, and like Glenn said too, it's probably so small an issue. They're trying their best every week. They're doing everything they can to prepare, but it doesn't help. It's not something you want to hear as the head coach. But that said, the league is about so much more than that. And I think it's wonderful that we've got owners involved like this. And I don't want to ever say anything negative about Victor, because he's been so awesome in everything that he's done this year. It's been really refreshing. But yeah, it's just a little confusing. I hope it doesn't go away, though. I hope this isn't the end of this, because I have personally enjoyed all of these guaranteed wins, no matter who it's coming from.
Well, the best part about it, at least in Hamilton here, is we got an owner that, and I know, Glenn, you've had plenty of conversations with the Ticats owner at Bob Young, and I mean, he takes a kind of different route and says that, the CFL is the greatest soap opera in sports, and whether they win or they lose, he sort of celebrates the league. So anyway, I guess everyone has their different approach. Let's again stay tuned to what happens next on this one. Well, Ben, right on you here for this. I know you got that double blue behind you. And I don't know what your perspective is, all three of you guys here. The Argonauts stage that second half comeback. They improved to 4-3 as they beat the Tiger Cats. Meanwhile, Hamilton blow a 17-6 lead in the second half, as they have so many times this season. They are now 2-6. The bigger story is Toronto or Hamilton?
I think it's hard to say which is the bigger story. It's just really been more of the same. This is something, like, as you alluded to, Hamilton has done this all year long, where they've come out and looked pretty good in the first half, and then we get to the fourth quarter and the wheels fall off. Toronto has come at it from the other side of things, where they've started extremely slow. And so you end up, with the exception of maybe the Montreal game, they've had really slow starts. And against Winnipeg, they came flying back and almost sent it into overtime, if not for the missed convert. They came back twice against Saskatchewan to win, and then did this again with Hamilton this week. So it's something that we probably should have been able to foresee, that Hamilton will get out to a big lead and Toronto will come charging back, and either will have enough or will just fall short of the comeback. But I think it's concerning, certainly for Hamilton, because this was a real opportunity for them to get over it. And I think there were so many chances in this game. It seemed like everything went wrong for them, and injuries really started to pile up. And there's some that I'm really concerned about. Addison is a huge loss for them. And if you're trying to get over a hump with with some sort of fourth quarter you can put together, having reliable players like that in your lineup would help. And I know it was pretty early in the game. I think it was 3-0 when Addison went down, but he's such a special player, and losing him, I don't know how long he's going to be out. It didn't look good at all. So, I would be really concerned for the Hamilton Tiger Cats moving forward. I don't think this is necessarily going to end well for them. And preseason, I thought they were going to be right in the mix. So, here we are.
Glenn, Toronto, Hamilton.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of stories there. When I look at the Argos, I still am on a bit of a roller coaster with McLeod Bethel Thompson. It feels like one day he's throwing for 400, the next day it's 200, and you're going, what's going on? It just looks so different at times. I think he's certainly capable. I've talked to Matt Dunnigan about it, and all his throws and those check marks that Ken Austin talked about, decision making and accuracy and those things, he's got that. But there just seems to be these lulls in his game. And probably one of the reasons that he has been on so many different teams in so many different leagues. So there's that. I knew Andrew Harris, if he's healthy, that could be the difference maker with McLeod. And for Hamilton, to me, the story is the different pressure on a quarterback, when he is one of a two-man crew or the guy. And I think Dane Evans has been squeezing the stick for the first half of the season a little too tightly to try and show that he's the guy. And when he just relaxes and plays his game, he's fantastic. And that guy we all believe that can be a championship quarterback. But it's been this sort of push past where you're comfortable and then make mistakes that are so uncharacteristic. So to me, those are the two stories on those two teams. If Andrew Harris is healthy, the Argos probably win the division.
Jeff?
Yeah, kind of just to piggyback off that, I don't know which ones. I think there's two narratives coming out of those two different cities. One's pure disappointment in Hamilton. I think a lot of people had them as, potential leaders of the East again. that maybe this was the year that they would break that Grey Cup drought, that Dane Evans was the right choice. I'm not suggesting Dane Evans isn't the right choice, but whatever's going on in Hamilton right now just isn't working. And to see in which, in which the ways they lose it's just almost been clockwork. It's just been, okay, they get out to a decent start and sure enough they crumble. And what is that? Is that second half adjustments? Is that coaching? Is that, it's obviously an issue there. And as they continue to fall behind, they're 2-6 now. It's not looking good for a team that went to back-to-back Grey Cups to even punch their ticket into the postseason this year. And with Toronto, I still don't get them. I don't know what team they are. I don't, they have great games. They have not so great games. I mean, they push, they start out nicely and then they get pushed around by BC and then they answer back with Saskatchewan and then they lose to Ottawa and then they come back here and they beat Hamilton in what looks like a triumphant kind of second half. It's just, I have real, I don't know what it is. I shouldn't say real concerns, but it's just, I question the discipline on that team. I question the personality on that team, the leadership group. I think there's too much fun in that locker room and not enough business, if that makes sense. And that's just my perspective of talking to some of the players on the team. I think McLeod Bethel-Thompson's a leader. I think he's likable. He's a great quote. Mm-hmm. There's all these things that you can point to, but when it comes down to push to shove, I mean, if you'll remember the Winnipeg game, I mean, Pinball Clemens had to come from upstairs in his box to stop Brandon Banks from having a hissy fit on the sidelines. That doesn't happen on teams that are why it doesn't happen in Winnipeg. I don't need to bring this because they know Mike. They would feel like it was such disrespect to Mike O'Shea to do that, and we wouldn't even have access to what Mike O'Shea would do to them once that game was over. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Banks wasn't a member of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers had he pulled something like that on the sidelines of Winnipeg. And I'm not trying to beat up on Ryan Dinwiddie, but this has kind of been a reoccurring theme since he's taken over. It's almost like he's too much of a player, not much of a coach, and they're trying to figure out their identity. And I'm speaking a little bit too much about Toronto because I'm not there every day. It's just in what I've seen, you can tell they're a talented team, but when they can't put it together year in and year out with the talent they have, you kind of have to look towards a few of the, I think you have to look towards coaching and leadership on the club.
With that said, Ben, the interesting thing here, and this is something that I think that just came up on a TSN sort of fact thing during the game on a little stat that I didn't even recognize, and it's an easy one to put together. But right now, Ryan Dinwiddie is 4-1 versus Orlando Steinauer.
Yeah, I think he's been a really good head coach. I think that gets lost in a lot of the conversations that we have. Ryan Dinwiddie, since he arrived, has done nothing but win. And put the Hamilton games, as an example, like 4-1, that's a great record against that team. And I think
against a guy that won Coach of the Year 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, and Ryan Dinwiddie has done nothing but win, and people keep asking questions, and I get why, because there are some high-profile incidents that occur. But remember, as a rookie head coach, he won the East. He finished with the best record in the East. And this year he's got his team in first place again. And it blows my mind that we still have people writing columns weekly about how Coach Dinwiddie should be fired and how McLeod Bethel-Thompson should be replaced. Like, these guys together combined, they've been the best team in the East. And Coach Dinwiddie's put together an impressive, I think over 600 win percentage in his time here. There have been a lot of Toronto head coaches who have come nowhere close to that. The start that he's off to, like Jeff alluded earlier to the slow start that Coach O'Shea got off to in Winnipeg. You think about these 2 years that we've had with Coach Dinwiddie here. They've been fantastic. It hasn't been finishing last in the league like rookie head coaches often do. It's been winning, and there have been some discipline problems. And the issue is that they are so high profile, but it's not like that day to day. Watching them at practice every day, they don't look like a team that's without discipline or lacks organization. They're very focused, laser focused. There are a lot of veterans on that team that know how to win because a lot of them have won before in different places. And they bring a mentality to practice and to game preparation that for some reason hasn't always translated on the football field during games. But there's been some improvement in that area. And I wish so much that Brandon Calver hadn't been ejected from the game just a couple of days ago, because that would have really hammered home the point of Ryan Dinwiddie focusing on discipline. But penalties were way down. I think they had 1 first half penalty and 4 overall. again, there was a high profile ejection because the second string long snapper who was forced into the game because of an injury to the long snapper gets kicked out. And now we're on to our third long snapper. And if it weren't for that, maybe that's not a huge story. But if you can put that aside, discipline has improved. The message has gotten across. The players that I talked to, that they love playing for Coach Dinwiddie. And yes, he is a bit of a player's coach, but I think he's a young head coach too, and he's finding that balance. And there are going to be growing pains. There are going to be game management mistakes. There's going to be issues like this that come up. But what we want to see is an improvement throughout. And as a coach he's only really coached through, what are we at, 20 games now in his coaching career as a head coach? I think he's done phenomenally well.
Yeah, Ben.
No, I just want to real quickly. I don't want anyone to be confused that I'm not a McLeod Bethel Thompson fan. You're right. He's a great quote, Jeff, and he's got all the ability in the world. I'm looking at sort of the waves of inconsistency at times, and the big moments where you need that drive to go the length of the field. We need to see those in the big games, especially against Western opponents. But I like Ryan or McLeod. I think McLeod is, a great passer. He's a great passer in the league.
Glenn, you were talking about Dane Evans on the Hamilton side of things, squeezing the stick.
Yeah.
2-6. I don't think there was any one of us that would say at the beginning of the year the Hamilton Tiger Cats through 8 games would be 2-6. I maybe I'm wrong, but is this directly offensive related? Have errors on the offense put the defense in sort of suspect situations, and that's why Hamilton are losing these games?
Well, I think you go back and look at it, and that's exactly why they have. And when they get out to leads and then those leads evaporate, you can say, well, the defense needs to make those stops too. I'm sure if we go back and examine every single game, you'll see moments where the defense could have contributed more. But I just look at the weird fumbles on a quarterback sneak and things like that are and look at the body language of Dane, and you guys know him well. When you sit and talk to him, he is so invested emotionally, physically, mentally, just completely wants to be the guy for that team and for the franchise and for the owner and for the fan base. And I think when he got the job and he got the nod and Jeremiah went to Ottawa, he was just, okay, now I'm going to take this and I'm going to run with it. And it goes bad early on a couple of times, just little mistakes, little drops in concentration, and all of a sudden they're 0-2 or whatever it was out of the gate. So yeah, I think that's been a big part of it. Sometimes you push too hard and you press too hard and things just get worse. He's just got to play his game. He'll be fine.
Jeff, at the end of that contest, first time again, and seeing him play, that he blew a stack. And I don't know if he was yelling at the coaching staff or players or himself, but he had a kind of I'm going to call it a mini emotional breakdown at the very end of the game in the last series of downs that the Ticats offense were on the field. And I that sign of frustration worries me a little bit, because to me, then once you start visually seeing some of that frustration, that may rub off as when that's coming from the quarterback.
Ask any quarterback across the league how important body language is, and I'll tell you it's up there as one of the number ones. It's not just for yourself. You're the one who's supposed to be calm in chaos. You're the one who's supposed to set the example emotionally for your unit, if not your entire team. And when you see your quarterback, falling apart or showing, wearing his heart on his sleeve to the point where he's showing that emotion to be almost too much, that sends a message to everybody else, or at least at the very least, it doesn't kind of bring everybody together. And so I think we're seeing that with Dane Evans for sure. I'm with Suits in the sense that this guy is completely invested. He's a very intelligent young man. He's articulate. He cares a lot. He cared. He was an ultimate teammate throughout the entire process with Jeremiah Masoli as they kind of went back and forth, including 2 visits to the Grey Cup. So, this guy has been battle tested. This isn't, and I don't want this to come across the wrong way by any means, and certainly not blaming his performance on it or whatever. but he's had a lot to take on this year personally, and that includes having a baby. And this isn't the NHL, this isn't the NBA, this isn't the NFL, where you can fly in your support system from across the country and it's like a small village taking care of a child. This guy is an invested father and an invested player. And again, I'm not trying to, put any negative twist towards this, but that's a lot to take on. And I think, maybe some of those emotions are coming from a full plate for him. But I also think that, he's a talented guy. Like, he's still second in the league, I think, in passing yards. And he's had to, he's had to launch the ball in some of those, instances where he's trailing or trying to come back. And he's had a lot of bad luck, whether that's been his own forced fumbles against him or receivers. I mean, how many times through the first 5-6 weeks did we see, him deliver the ball and the numbers exactly where you want it, only for it to, in some cases just pop up and go to other players, or just have the craziest bounce where he's getting picked off. I mean, at some point in time, he's got to wonder why the football gods are against him. But I think, when you just go back to the body language stuff, there have been several instances throughout the weeks of him showing that. And there's, that other point where Nick Arbuckle came over and consoled him on the bench after. I mean, that stuff, like, look, I'm all for helping each other out and supporting, player to player, but that stuff is not great. It's just, it shows defeatedness. And for a guy who's, who we've seen in the past face the microphones and come back stronger, to see him seemingly get more and more difficult week in and week out, it's not a great sign for Dane Evans, and it's certainly not a good sign for the Ticats.
I think at first look, when you look at the schedule for week 10, I guess this would be, BC and Calgary just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. I'll name it the game of the week. Ben, who do you got?
I got to take BC just because of how dominant they have looked at times. Now, that said, I think it's going to be a really tight game. And I think, I can't remember now, I think I had BC over Winnipeg, and obviously that didn't work out well a few weeks back. But they have such incredible firepower. And Calgary, I don't think, is in a great place right now. Remember, Calgary's offense only put up 10 points against the Ottawa Red Blacks. They ended up getting another 7 defensively. Calgary, I think, really was rattled by the losses to Winnipeg. I think they really felt, especially that second game, I really think they thought they were going to win that game. And they played really well and yet still came up short. And I think that's got them a little bit unhinged. I know against Ottawa, they were missing some pieces, missing Gideon Carey, missing a head coach. These things do matter. But just based on watching them last week, Calgary did not look like a team going forward. And I don't think a team could have looked much better than how BC looked this week. So I think it's going to be a great game. It's definitely the game of the week. There's no question. It's the one I'm looking forward to most. So I can't wait for it. But yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with BC. I would not be shocked if Calgary won, though.
Glenn, these are the kind of games where I feel like Bo Levi Mitchell gets that chip on his shoulder.
Oh yeah. And he didn't have a great game in Ottawa, let's be honest. And just real quickly on that the Bombers win against Calgary, I agree. I think Calgary was poised to be the first to knock them off the pedestal for 1 week. And when they lost that, but I think about the Edmonton game between Winnipeg and Edmonton, where Zach completes 7 passes. Never in my history in football have I seen a team where their quarterback completed 7 passes and they won the game. I mean, unheard of, but they find a way. So yeah, I don't make predictions, but I will say that it is the game of the week. I want to see Nathan Rourke up against the best teams in the league. When Zach and Nathan went head to head, Zach put on a clinic in Vancouver and all of a sudden said, hey, I know everybody's excited about this 24-year-old kid, but reigning MOP is still here and still getting it done. And he really, showed him up. I wouldn't say showed him up, but
he looked good.
He looked great, and they don't play against each other. But yeah, I thought Zach made a strong statement there by his play. But this game of the week, can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see Nathan in Calgary against a good Calgary defense.
I got to go with the BC. I mean, I will say one caveat just to rewind a little bit. There was another game, Suits, that someone completed 7 passes. It was Chris Strevler 2 years before, but the difference was he rushed for nearly 100 yards, and the team equated to like 160 on the ground, and that was not the case in Edmonton. But that's just been the Bombers. It's been complementary football. When one phase isn't picking up the slack, the other two are, and when they're rolling 3 phases, they're unbeatable, as we've seen this season. But as far as this game, I have to give it to BC. I think, just, to echo what Ben had said, just given what the Lions did the week before versus what Calgary did, I think Calgary was very fortunate, obviously up against a lot of obstacles with COVID and not having their head coach and missing guys like Trey Roberson and Sean McEwen. Those are big losses. But at the same time, like I just find that, they were lucky that they played Ottawa last week. I don't know if they would have beat many other teams. But that being said, that, this is a team I think with the Stamps have a lot to prove. I think there's a lot of pride in that locker room for sure. And this will be kind of the game of who decides who's second best in the West behind the big bad Blue Bombers. So I think both teams will be motivated, and certainly I'll be keeping I'll be watching that one from start to finish.
Glenn, you get out to that stadium quite often. It looked like the fans were really out there for the last contest. When they did play the Bombers, that they got, I guess, a season high in crowd and attendance. And, can that make a difference at McMahon Stadium for this team here and getting that crowd support? And as you talked about, getting Kadeem Carey back, and of course your head coach coming back from COVID will be probably a big addition for Calgary. But is there, it's definitely a difference in Winnipeg. I mean, the fan support and the volume of the crowd, that can be a difference maker. But can that be the same way in Calgary?
Yeah, I think there's not a sport in the world that takes more advantage of home field. I mean, that's football, and home field is why you get 3 from the bookmakers and the gambling guys. You just basically you're +3 when you're at home. I mean, it's part of it. So, and that crowd, by the way, against Winnipeg was outstanding. And I know there were a few narratives on social media that suggested that there weren't enough fans and why aren't they more? And I still scratch my head that we continue to beat up on the people that are there and wonder where the people that are not there, talk about them all the time. They were a great crowd. The atmosphere was fantastic. The tailgating was off the hook great, because I walked around the parking lots before the game. They were loud. They helped. Didn't get the job done on the field, but the crowd was fantastic. And yes, it can help. It definitely can help. Even if it causes one illegal procedure call at the wrong time for the opposing offense, even if there's a time when they can't communicate quite right on defense because they can't hear each other and they mess up a signal and that costs a bust in the coverage or something. All of those little things matter in those plays, especially against 2 really good teams, which we're going to see in this game and this week. So it can matter. And let's talk about the 25,000 plus that were there in Calgary, that were loud and fantastic. What other event in our country can bring 25,000 people together in the middle of the summer? Not many. Maybe the odd Blue Jay game while they're in the championship run, but not many.
I'm with you on that, guys, but I will be coming after you guys next week because I'm picking Calgary in this game. That's who I'm going after, guys. That's who I'm liking in this one. I think they're going to bounce back. Guys, this has been, again, as always, a tremendous discussion. CFL football at its best. We have talked about this, before the podcast. It is great to see great games. We're not talking about the quality of the game and, the passing games, and it's all defense. Is this a trend or not? We're seeing great football, and it's an applaud to the coaching staffs, the players, of course, the fans showing up. It's been a real nice bounce back season. And of course, it's great having you guys talking about these games and breaking it down for us and looking forward as well, too. Jeff Hamilton, Winnipeg Press, where can we Free Press, where can we find you?
WinnipegFreePress.com. And if you will be doing all CFL coverage, exciting Jets off season, a non-exciting off season is made for an exciting off season. So all that in the WinnipegFreePress.com.
Glenn, where do we find you?
Well, I have the Edmonton game for TSN this weekend and Winnipeg. So I missed the Calgary game. Darn it. but hey, every time that the Bombers play, Can they get knocked off? Is this going to be the 1 week? So that storyline is certainly strong in the Winnipeg game, but those two games are mine this weekend.
All right. And Ben, again, fantastic rookie performance, Ben.
Nice.
Where can we find you?
I'm doing my best here. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Ben_Grant, and you can find all my work, video breakdowns, and day-to-day Argos coverage at xsandargos.com.
Well, 3 more meetings in the next 4 weeks between the Ticats and the Argos. We'll be seeing again. Come find us at Iverwood. Listen to me at Tim Hortons Field for sure.
I'll see you there on Friday.
All right, guys. Again, thank you so much for joining us, folks. This has been the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. We are with you every Monday with a new podcast, talking CFL, talking a little controversy on and off the field. Hey, this week we talked about the owners, for crying out loud, being on social media. So we can touch a lot of things, guys. Like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And of course, we're always on whatever podcast catcher that you subscribe to. We are there. So join us next week. This has been the CFL This Week. I'm Bubba O'Neil saying, watch us on the Ticats Audio Network.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.